Okay, now the time is 2 p.m. We hope to start the International Symposium of the ISBS 2025 Kyoto, the future of well-being. First, thank you for coming to our symposium. My name is Takahiko Kameyama. I am an associate professor of Institute for the Future of Human Society, Kyoto University. In this symposium, I am working as a moderator. Okay, first, Professor Yukiko Uchida, Director of Institute for the Future of Human Society, Kyoto University, will deliver an opening remarks of the symposium. Okay, Uchida.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. The distinguished guests, esteemed colleagues, and participants. It is my great honor as the director of the Institute of the Future of Human Society at Kyoto University to extend my warmest greetings on this occasion. I'm truly delighted that Kyoto University has the privilege of hosting the second conference of International Society for Bhutan Studies, a leading society in cutting-edge Bhutan research. And it is a profound privilege for our institute to be helping organize this international symposium, The Future of Well-being. To our esteemed guest from Bhutan, I extend my gratitude for making the long journey to Kyoto. I would also like to express my sincere appreciation to all participants joining this symposium. Kyoto is experiencing particularly cold weather this week, but I sincerely hope that you are enjoying your time here in Kyoto. Our institute has been deeply influenced by Bhutan and the concept of well-being. The term well-being is often associated with happiness, yet its meaning extends far beyond momentary pleasure. As a social and cultural psychologist, I have dedicated my career to the study of culture and well-being. Well-being involves thinking about future happiness, the well-being of significant others and our communities, even the planet itself. In Japanese, word shiawase, this is translated in English happiness, has roots that emphasize interconnectedness, creating something together and the meaningful relationship we built in life. True well-being arises when people support one another and when human society and nature collaborate in pursuit of the better world, a perspective that has also been traditionally valued in Japan, like in Bhutan. Bhutan has long been a global pioneer in advancing the concept of well-being, highlighting its fundamental importance of humanity and incorporating it into its unique political, economic, and cultural activities. A symbolic example of this vision is gross national happiness, GNH, one of the key themes of today's discussion. Unlike GDP, GNH seeks to qualify the total amount of happiness of a nation of people. While Bhutan is often recognized as the happy country, its true significance lies not only being a happy place, but in pioneering a profound conceptual framework that has inspired global discourse. I had the privilege of visiting Bhutan in 2012 as part of Kyoto University Bhutan Friendship Program, and then again in 2013 to participate in the International Expert Working Group on GNH, and 2015 to participate in the GNH conference. These experiences provided me with invaluable insights. I observed that Bhutanese society is built upon principles that are increasingly important in today's world, spreading happiness beyond the self, fostering harmonious coexistence with nature, and emphasizing sustainable well-being. The pursuit of economic prosperity and material wealth, driven by the competitive mindset, has led humans to confront serious social issues of our time, like energy crisis, population issues, social inequality, and poverty and loss of ecosystems. Now, more than ever, we must seriously reconsider the future of our global society. Our institute collaborates with scholars and practitioners within and beyond the university to generate knowledge and solutions for these pressing challenges. Today, as part of this ongoing endeavor, we are honored to help to organize this international symposium. I really look forward to the insightful discussion ahead and hope this symposium will be a meaningful and enriching experience for all participants. I firmly believe in the power of academia and that through the accumulation of such discussions, we have the potential to create new networks, foster collaboration, and develop new solutions for the world. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. ありがとうございました、Professor Uchida. Next, Professor Seiji Kumagai, Divisional Director of Uehiro Research Division, Institute for the Future of Human Society, will give a talk, Introduction, Research and Development of Kokoro Technology towards Well-being and Well-going and Well-being. Okay, please.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, I would like to express my warmest gratitude to President Sabina Alkire, Professor of Oxford, University of Oxford, and also President of ISBS, International Society for Bhutan Studies, and Dasho Karumaura, the President of Center for Bhutan and GNH Studies, and also Director Yukiko Uchida, kindly giving a opening remarks, and all of the participants, professors here. And we just closed our international conference of Bhutan Studies so yesterday, and we are very happy and honored to hold this international symposium for public. And how of you are the specialists of Bhutan, but how of you are not specialists of Bhutan, just interested in well-being? So I'd like to explain very briefly what is Bhutan and where is Bhutan. Bhutan is sandwiched between India and China, like that. So next to Nepal. And you may know the fifth king who visited Japan in 2011. His father, the former king, the fourth king, the Bhutan, he modernized Bhutan and internationalized Bhutan. And the fourth king, the former king, declared the gross national happiness is more important than gross national product. That is, GNH is more important than GNP or GDP. That is, the happiness is more important just only product or money. While maybe you should note that GNH never denies the importance of money. It appreciates money, finance, but at the same time, it appreciates also the culture and the nature and, for example, sleeping time. And that's very important. Yes. And happiness is a hot topic in global politics and international academicism. And you may know that the International Day of Happiness was adopted by United Nations in 2012. I believe that Bhutan took very important role regarding this Day of Happiness. And happiness and well-being are widely studied in many disciplines such as psychology, neuroscience, economics, politics, philosophy, developmental studies, etc. And as I said, we hold the ISBS conference, and we founded this society, International Society for Bhutan Studies, 10 years ago in Paro, Bhutan. And the president is Professor Sabina Alkire, University of Oxford. And if you are interested in, could you please check its website. And Oxford, President Sabina hosted ISBS launch conference in 2019. And so we wanted to hold it earlier, but because of the COVID-19, we could not hold it, and we postponed. And very auspiciously, we could had very successful conference between 4th and 6th February until yesterday. And many scholars talk about Bhutan and also well-being, especially concerning on the policy of gross national happiness. Yes, and so we are pleased to hold international symposium on well-being after the just after the conference of Bhutan, which is the country pursuing well-being. And here, let me introduce Moonshot project of Japan's Cabinet Office, which is related to well-being. So, you know, the Moonshot project is, the original one is an Apollo project to launch the people to the moon. But after the Apollo project finished, the Moonshot became a general term to the clarification of the whole genome system or something. And the Japanese government Cabinet Office started Japan's Moonshot project. And the Moonshot Research and Development Program sets ambitious goals and to attract people and promotes challenging research and development projects with the aim of resolving difficult societal issues while bringing together the wisdom of researchers from all over the world. And currently there are 10 goals. For example, quantum computer or health or controlling typhoon or something. And our Moonshot Goal 9 is the project to enhance mental well-being by Kokoro technology. I call Kokoro Tech. The Kokoro is a Japanese concept, peculiar concept. It's similar to the concept of the mind, but it has wider meaning than mind. It includes mind, heart, spirit, essence, space, etc. Center of the space, etc. And our program is trying to realize, to conduct research and development to realize a mentally healthy and dynamic society by increasing peace of mind and vitality by 2050 with sub-program directors Inoguchi, the molecular biologist, and Professor Nishida. He's a professor of Kyoto University. He's a specialist of he's using MRI and cognitive science. And Professor Morita is a specialist of public administration, and a specialist of health in ethical, and legal, and social issues. And we are creating the technology to contribute to human happiness. But the concept of happiness differs according to people because we are diverse. And so we tentatively postulated two aspects that is to pacify the negative mental status and support to positive mental status. According to two aspects, we are now conducting research and development. And we have two targets. The first one is that people have a high individual mental stability with an active role in their own lives, and the people can accurately understand their mental status and move towards their desired status in 2050. To achieve this target, we are creating the technology to understand individual mental status and transition, how to transit our mental status. And the second target is that society can widely accept and utilize diversity using technology to enhance the empathy, stability, and creativity of groups and disseminate mental support services around the world in 2050. To achieve this target, we are creating mental health support technology in terms of interpersonal and intergroup communication. The director Uchida is a specialist of well-being, but she is focusing on especially collective well-being. That's very important. It's related to our target too. And Moonshot Goal 9 consists of three factors. to clarify the mechanism of mind and also mental state transition, how to transit our mind, mental status positively. And not only development of such technology is not enough, and we would like to apply and implement such technology to society so that people can get profit and people can become happier, like that. And there are now 13 project managers conducting their research group, and including lab staff, there are more than, I think, 1,000 scholars, including grad student, I think. But I don't know how much, and that's very big. And Professor Imai Mizu is conducting the research on meditation, Buddhist meditation. And he is now expanding from Buddhist meditation to other religious meditation. Especially he is creating a neurofeedback system. And Professor Tsutsui is creating the translator between ASD and the TD people, because ASD people are not very good at to express their emotion or read the emotion of other people. So, please take seat. Yes, there are several spaces. So there are many seats, so please. And Professor Hashida is creating personal AI, and welfare and Maemuki is a Japanese concept, kind of the forward-looking. But she is now creating the philosophy itself to not only positive, it also includes negative emotion, so kind of the negative capability like that. And children support, especially ASD children, supporting by using art and food appetite transition. And Professor Takumi's team is trying to create animal VR, and he, first in the world, he created a mouse metaverse. So he integrated two mouse VRs, multimodal mouse VR, and created a mouse metaverse. And now he is creating the monkey metaverse. And in the future, he will integrate them with human metaverse. And Professor Nakamura is good at, he's now creating the real-time daily sense and life sensing by a wearable sensor. And Dr. Hosoda is trying to create a new system of child care. And Professor Miyazaki is creating the technology to control serotonin nerve system by optogenetics. By using, for one moment, he's now using mouses to control the serotonin system, accelerate or pacify the serotonin. And then a mouse can endure to wait more time to get food or like that. So it's related to our endurable ability. And so that's why there are several different topics, but they use very similar machines and the technique. For example, human research, they use functional MRI and EEG, and also MEG, like that. And the animal experimentation, they use optogenetics to control the nervous system by light and also virus vector. And based on such a machine and technique, they are now creating the technology, the highly accurate emotion estimation system, and also feedback technology to the desired state according to individual characteristics by using VR or apps. And in order to assess such technology, whether good or not, we are now creating indicators, so-called MS9, well-going indicators. It's very similar concept as well-being, but different. Later I will explain. And we are also creating a database. Okay, I will skip. So what is the concept of well-going? This concept was declared by Kyoto University philosopher, Professor Yasuo Deguchi, several years ago. And well-being, you know, the definition of health by WHO. So health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. So state of being physically healthy and mentally and socially happy at the present time. It could be the definition of well-being. So well-being is static and present-oriented happiness. Now happy is well-being, the state. And well-going is dynamic and future-oriented happiness, he defined. And so, for example, you know, the poverty correlates unhappiness. So income correlates happiness. So poor people, or we can say poor state, could be said ill-being. But yeah, that's true. If we are poor, we are not very happy. But in some cases, even if we are poor, for example, just after creating a new company, startup, no income. But in the near future, I will become like Bill Gates or Zuckerberg or like that. So now very, very poor ill-being, but well-going, very positive. So we can, so well-going and so well-being and ill-being contradict, but ill-being and well-going do not contradict. So we can be the state of well-going, even in the case of ill-being, or poor or miserable state, even miserable status. Of course, ideally, we should be the state of well-being and well-going. But in many cases, we are not in well situation. But anyway, we postulated two concepts. According to Professor Deguchi's, here is his source. So well-going is not non-confrontational to well-being. Okay, so if you are interested in our Moonshot Goal 9, please check our website and contact us. And last month, the Nature released featured our project. So if you are interested in, we will share the Nature's article. So in order to further examine well-being, we invited two specialists of well-being. So first, Professor Sabina Alkire from Oxford. She's talking about the measuring well-being and poverty to guide policy action. And after break, President Karmaura, will talk about well-being in the history and culture of Bhutan. So we hope that you will enjoy their talks and deepen your and my understanding of well-beings. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Kumagai. Okay, as he said, next we will have a first lecturer, Professor Sabina Alkire, Director of Oxford Poverty and Human Development Initiative, Professor of Poverty and Human Development, Oxford University, will give a lecture. Okay, please.
Thank you so much. It's a delight to be here. I'm very grateful to Professor Uchida for the hospitality of Kyoto University, both for the conference of ISBS and for this international symposium. I'm grateful to Professor Seiji Kumagai, who is also now the Vice President of ISBS, for all of your organization, leadership, imagination, and attention to detail with your team. And it's wonderful to be with Dr. Karmaura, whose work really informs and inspires this. The topic we agreed was to think in an international context how to measure well-being and use those measures to inform policies that advance well-being. So, as many know, we are in a time in which the international community has decided to measure well-being beyond GDP. And there are many activities led by the UN System Chief Executives Board for coordination on this topic. Very briefly, in December 2021, the core group on Beyond GDP was established by the UN Secretary General's request. The concept note was approved, they drafted a paper, and there are now different meetings, the last of which was in October 2024. and they are articulating why we need to go beyond GDP, what the framework will be, the number of indicators, and how a decision will be made. And the Pact for the Future, signed at the Summit of the Future last year, also had an action to develop this measure of progress on sustainable development that would complement and go beyond GDP. So there is an international focus now on measurement. And furthermore, the domains of well-being, whether these are the domains of GNH or the dimensions of the many different well-being dashboards throughout the world done by national statistics offices, they are quite similar in terms of their agreement on the possible domains. But what is lacking at the moment is agreement on how to measure the domains, and to do so in a way that is appropriate both to track successful policies that build well-being and also to inform policy actions so they can be shaped differently. So to give just one example in terms of the domains of agreement, the Stiglitz-Sen-Fitoussi Commission established by President Sarkozy in 2009 identified 8 dimensions of quality of life that they argued should be measured alongside beyond GDP, and this sparked much of the interest towards the beyond GDP work. They are similar to the Bhutan GNH dimensions, except for they lack culture, and the psychological well-being aspects are perhaps a bit reduced. 10 years later, OECD followed up both with some suggestions of how to include green aspects in GDP and also how to measure each of the dimensions of quality of life. But they did not propose any synthetic indicator beyond their Better Life Index, which they have not updated. Shortly after, in Princeton University, they convened a group that was modeled after the IPCC, the International Panel on Climate Change, and it was anticipated that this group would provide a similar level of depth and insight in terms of the progress of societies. So the International Society for the Progress of Societies. And they looked at these different dimensions of well-being. It was a project of multiple years with over 250 academics working on it. And they discussed how each of these domains of well-being that contribute in different ways could be measured or could be assessed in alternative ways, and came up with, in the end, 3 volumes that they published on doing so. But the link to policy was quite weak, and indeed the Manifesto for Social Progress, which came out of ISBS and was authored by its chair, Marc Fleubet, really focused on the need for values, principles, and conversations, and left measurement to one side. So there is still a space, a need, an interest, and a demand to measure well-being in a way that is accessible and yet also policy relevant. So what existing measures are used at the present time? The most prominent is to use a dashboard of indicators, whether Netherlands or the UK, whether Japan or other countries, having a board of different indicators that pertain to well-being in different ways is the most common. Each indicator is tracked over time, and it is disaggregated by different groups to create a statistical report. The second option is to develop a composite index. The Human Development Index of the UNDP is the most long-standing of such, where you take, in their case, 3 dimensions: health, education, and living standards, a set of indicators that are normalized. You take the average of society, and then you add them up across time, or you take a harmonic mean, a geometric mean, as the current HDI. That structure, mathematical structure of normalizing and aggregating national averages also underlies the Global Peace Index, the Better Life Index of OECD, the Social Progress Index of Michael Green, Michael Porter, the Legaten Prosperity Index, the Mo Ibrahim Index of Governance, and others. It's a very common structure. And there is another option, which is a dashboard of composite measures. So for example, Seiji of Global Solutions Initiative has 4 composite indices on their dashboard. I'd like to think about these 2 options of dashboards and composite indicators and some of the challenges that they face when it comes to meeting this demand for an actionable policy measure, and reflect on Bhutan's G&H index as a different way of addressing these needs. So here is a snapshot of 2 of the 10 domains of the UK's well-being dashboard, which has 59 indicators. And you see each indicator is presented one by one with the trends over time in the little diagram. And sometimes the bar charts are showing disaggregations. The challenge is that there is no bird's eye view. You have 59 dials on your dashboard, and more is always better, and they're national averages. Something like Seiji does have some composite measures covering solidarity using a social solidarity index, agency using an agency index, material gain using GDP, and environmental sustainability using the environmental performance index. So all 4 are indices, of which the 3rd is the familiar GDP. So the fundamental problems of dashboards and of composite indices are 3. The first is equity. If you think of average years of schooling, which is an indicator in the Human Development Index and in most of the composite measures, you are averaging up the number of years of a person who took 10 years to complete their doctorate, with a person who got a doctorate, with those who finished 12 years, with those with no schooling at all. And you're taking the average years of schooling. And so you're trading off people who took too long or people who had the possibility to have a doctorate against, and you're mixing it up with people who had no education and taking the mean. So you can't see any changes in equity. You can't see if there are fewer people with no education and if people are finishing their education in different times. A second challenge is pluralism. Particularly in the West, a big challenge for well-being is that people do not agree what well-being is. And it is well recognized that human well-being is diverse. People have different patterns. If you think of musical styles, some people like a very hard beat, some people like lyrical classical music, and others prefer silence. And so it would seem that a measure of well-being would need a spaciousness to incorporate different life paths and different preferences, characteristics, personality types, and also disabilities that are experienced. And yet, if you think of a dashboard, more is always better. So if you have a person who likes silence and music is on your dashboard, then it is better for them if they are in a loud musical environment. If you have a hermit who doesn't necessarily need a lot of friends, then you would consider them deprived. So any dashboard will disregard people who, by their own personal preferences or diverse paths of flourishing, would wish to opt out of that indicator. So there's a drawback, and composite indices have the same drawback. And the third is action, that in a sense, the measures should show differences between people and between indicators, and they should be able to inform government policies. And here the challenges are different. In the case of a composite measure, because of how the weighting structures are usually done, you actually do not know if there's an improvement in the years of schooling for one person, so monotonic increase. You do not know if there will be a monotonic increase in the Human Development Index because of how the weights and the aggregation is done. So a policymaker doesn't really trust it, because if you do better work and your grades go down, it's unfair. And so that monotonicity between outcome and the move of the measure is obscured, which doesn't provide policy incentives in a very clear way. So there are challenges of different types. In the case of dashboards, as the Stiglitz-Sen-Fitoussi Commission observed, large and eclectic dashboards mean that policymakers might ignore indicators, pick some. There's no priority between them. So those are unfulfilled needs of both the composite indices and the dashboards. And in addition, the composite indices usually cannot be disaggregated. HDI is usually available only at the national level. Similarly, Better Life Index, Social Progress Index, Legatum Prosperity, only national measures obtain. So to move on, a question is whether a structure similar to the Bhutan GNH Index would be useful. And just to recall what that GNH Index does, it selects some indicators of well-being, and then for each it asks, what is a core level of attainment that would provide a floor for well-being for people who enjoy that indicator, a sufficiency threshold. And then you aggregate across individuals to see in which proportion of weighted indicators they have sufficiency. And so they have a score. And then to permit pluralism, you do not require them to be good at everything. A Renaissance man or woman might be flourishing, but also a person who has deliberately curtailed, for example, their income because they are happy with a simple life. Or perhaps they didn't have education, but they are able to flourish in many other ways. And then you can aggregate into an index that indeed can have that property that an improvement will always improve the index, but it might also have more direct links to policy. So by setting a sufficiency threshold, you get around the equity criticism that everybody's years of schooling are mashed up. If you say you need at least 12 years of schooling, or at least 10, then anybody with less than that would not have sufficiency. You get through across the pluralism criticism because you permit people to have diverse paths to flourishing and to opt out of some. And you improve the policy angle because it's much more transparent and predictable. So what I would wish to explore a little bit is how poverty measures have taken some space and demonstrated their policy relevance, and then return to Bhutan's GNH Index. I'd like to mention that in the committee report to the UN Secretary General, it only mentions two indices, the HDI and the Global Multidimensional Poverty Index. And so the question would be whether going forward there might be a multidimensional well-being index of the same structure. So I'd like to step back for a moment into poverty and into countries that are not Japan, just to show a little bit how this works in practice and how much simpler poverty measures are used in policy. I'll go relatively quickly, but just to touch on some of the uses. So at this time, around 43 to 55 countries have official multidimensional poverty indices, And those countries have at least 3.3 billion people, if you take the lower end of that number of countries. So it's coming up to, well, it's over 40% of the world's population. And these are obviously reported in the Sustainable Development Goals, but they are also used for policy. And the important feature of these measures is that they are of political interest because they are incorporated in management structures as key performance indicators, and their announcement by a minister or a president or prime minister is a signal of where the country stands, not only on monetary poverty, but on multidimensional poverty. And this, as was observed by our late and beloved Sir Tony Atkinson, is one reason that poverty statistics matter, is that they must be linked to action. But I would argue that well-being measure, like poverty, should be linked to action. It should not just be a rigorous statistic with no possibility that it be used. So a very simplified approach that is the same for well-being and poverty with very small differences is to select dimensions and indicators and then to set a cutoff for each person and create a score. In the case of poverty, it's a score of things that are going wrong. In the case of well-being, it's a score of things that are going right. And both of them would set a cutoff that would identify somebody as either poor or attaining a state of well-being. And when you do that using the counting-based methodology and create an adjusted headcount ratio, then you have a statistic which journalists understand. It's the percentage of people in a country who are poor or who enjoy well-being. And that's what the journalists want. They don't want 59 indicators of a dashboard and it comes up to the Prime Minister, how is well-being? And the Prime Minister has to give 59 answers. The journalist walks away after 3. So you need something to capture the public's imagination to communicate very simply. Our phone time is going down as we have faster and faster data on our phones. But also for policy take-up, you can see how people are poor and you can see the level. And this is the most important thing for a well-being measure, and it's the same for the poverty. Here, the height of the stack is the level of poverty. And the height of the stack is made up of all of the deprivations of all poor people with their weights. And so this is a stack. So if you take out any deprivation of any poor person, the height of the stack comes down. So there's a very direct link between things government policy can do, putting children in school, building better houses, providing water sanitation, or whatever is lacking in rural areas, and the indicators in a metric. This would also be the same for a well-being measure. If you focus on the people who do not have well-being, and you address any of the indicators in which they lack sufficiency, well-being will increase. So now that we are talking about many countries and many policy actors and spaces, how are they using these official national MPIs? The night I arrived here last Monday at 11 p.m., we launched a handbook for policymakers, which draws on interviews with dozens of policy actors in dozens of countries from a very low level up to the head of state level on how they have used poverty measures. One is to provide a sister to monetary poverty, just like a well-being measure would provide a sister to GDP. For example, in America, which has a MPI that finds 22.3% of people were poor at a time when 20.6% of people were monetary poor. 12.3% of Americans were income poor and 15 were multidimensionally poor. And what you see is they were not the same. only 8.3% of Americans were poor by both measures. So the multidimensional poverty brought into view people who were poor but not currently undergoing government attention, 21.7 million people. And so the US Bureau of Census that creates this measure studied them, published that paper about the value add of understanding people who are poor in different ways than monetary. The simple idea is that if you have one eye and you try to pour your cup of tea, you might miss your cup, because with one eye, you only see in 2 dimensions. So having 2 measures, multidimensional and monetary, whether it's GDP and GNH, whether it's monetary poverty and multidimensional, that gives a better fix on what poverty is. The second is to track trends over time. Is well-being going up or down? So for example, in India, in 2005, 55% of Indians were poor. By 2015-16, it was 25%. And by 2019-21, it was 14.5% by their national MPI. In the United States, monetary poverty reduced half as fast as multidimensional. So multidimensional came down faster. But you see that there was an acceleration from 2013 to 2015. So the orange line is steeper. What happened at that point was the Obama Health Care Act. There's no change on monetary poverty because health is not part of monetary poverty, and it has a very large and diffuse lag. But if healthcare is in the MPI, which it is in the case of America, that changes at once. If you put a child in school and that child school attendance is in the poverty measure changes at once, but monetary poverty has a lag. The same for housing. If we come to well-being, there are many aspects of well-being, like meditation, that would not be in the GDP. But if it is in the well-being measure, then if that changes that year, well-being will increase. And because this is policy responsive, I think 9 countries have already cut their national MPIs by half, and 13 are en route to do so. So for example, Vietnam from 2012 to 2023 cut it from 18.1 to 2.9, Thailand, Maldives, Bhutan, Dominican Republic, Nepal, many countries at different stages have made sharp reductions. Could we also have sharp increases in well-being? The third use is budget allocation. And this is done by most countries now that use an MPI, though the budgetary models vary across countries. So for example, when Costa Rica launched its MPI, there was a big mismatch between how they allocated their funds and the indicators in their measure. So the president issued a decree that the budget must reflect poverty, and they were in austerity. They could not increase their budget. But in 2015, they reallocated, and you see the reduction in poverty that ensued, and it is cut by more than half in 13 years. Another use of the MPI is to identify the poorest or the vulnerable, whether they are indigenous people, geographic places, people with disabilities, people with care burdens, or mental health struggles, and to disaggregate. This disaggregation is something that the composite indices cannot do. Another is to coordinate, and this might be the most important. It's certainly been of great interest in policy terms across Latin America. So, for example, in Colombia, they have 15 indicators in their MPI, and the president set up a round table that he personally chaired with 9 ministers. The ministers could not send deputies. They used the indicators of the MPI as key performance indicators in a dashboard that McKinsey and Baber's deliverology unit in the Blair government helped them to set up. And each year, They looked at the indicators that were off track by their results framework. They had some unallocated money, and they did responsive policies to clear that bottleneck. So these slides are used with permission from the government, and they show on the bottom the indicators that were blocked and the responsive policies. From 2010 to 2018, they cut MPI and monetary poverty by 1/3, and that was the time when peace, after a 40-year civil war, came to Colombia. And also the MPI is used to see whether the poorest regions have the fastest progress. This is important for political stability, for ethical reasons, and for leaving no one behind. So here we have the poorest states on the right-hand side, and it's a race to zero poverty, and the poorest are winning the race. They're moving the fastest. In terms of well-being, would the places that struggle with well-being be increasing at the fastest, or would inequity multidimensionally be increasing? This project of reducing poverty, like the project of augmenting well-being, is not just a government project. It requires the private sector, NGOs, students, citizens, journalists, many others. So actually, most governments also do media training and find ways of communicating in local languages. The government of Ghana, their statistics office, prepared 261 census documents for local governments in different languages, so the local governments knew what to do to address their poverty. Could we also share that information on what local actors can do to increase well-being? Because many hands, many minds, many hearts, people with compassion make light work and can have the same central goals. And that includes the private sector. President Santos invited the CEOs, because he was from a business political party, to come to the field in Cali, in a very poor district, with appropriate security protection. And they donned the blue vests of the social workers, and they got a clipboard, and they went into a house of a poor person, and they asked the questions, and then they came back. And for many of those CEOs, it was their first time to have a face-to-face encounter with impoverished people, and they came back motivated to change. People also come back motivated. I had somebody I was working with who had worked in the Prime Minister's office of his country. We were interviewing poor people, and the lady was smiling very strongly, although she was destitute. And he said, "Why are you so happy?" at the end of the interview. And she spoke about her daughters. She was in a very dangerous profession. There were rhinos in the forest, and she had to gather firewood. But she loved her daughters. She was a person of deep faith, and she was flourishing. And he was astonished by her well-being as well as her poverty. So the question then is whether these kinds of uses of policy of poverty could come into well-being space using the GNH index. And just to give an example, Oxford University Press also published a book, like it published Dasha Karma's book, The Unremembered Nation, books, 2 of them, by Juan Manuel Santos, on how he used their MPI during his term of government. So if we want to use a well-being measure for policy, perhaps thinking about the GNH index would be one way to do so. The GNH index was created by Dasha Karma Ora, and Karma Wangdi, Jimmy Punso, Tsoki Zamno are the key people working on it, and all of this work is due to their efforts. And JICA was involved, as you can see, and gratitude also to JICA. So you know that there are 9 domains and 33 indicators. But just to remind you that just like a poverty measure, for each indicator there's a question of what would be the basic level of attainment that might be the cause or condition of well-being for the people who enjoy that. And then the cutoff to permit diversity. You don't need well-being in every indicator, but in 2/3 to be categorized as having well-being or happiness. And so you can then divide into the headline the journalists love, which is what percentage of people are happy. But you, of course, go beyond that to have gradients, because just a dichotomy is not enough. So a gradient of deeply or extensively happy, narrowly or unhappy people. And this is used, first of all, to look at levels of happiness and to disaggregate, which, remember, you cannot do by GDP in many countries. And so the darker areas by the 2022 GNH index have the higher levels, and the darker pie charts that are bigger have the larger number of people who have higher levels of well-being. And then, just like you can compare the profile of poverty and see what to do, you can look at people who enjoy well-being or who need changes and see what needs to be changed to increase GNH. And so over time, for example, in the 7 years between the two surveys, there were strong increases in the living standard indicators or in the schooling and the literacy, in access to services and in positive emotions. But there were also decrements in all of the cultural diversity indicators, as well as political participation and healthy days. This was over the pandemic period. So you can see, have a radiography of how things have changed, which is useful, just like you would use a metric to know what's going well or poorly when you see the doctor. Well, this is good, well, but you really have to watch your chocolate consumption. And this is the key for policy. This is what all of the governments use. They want to know how many people in my country are poor, or in this case, are not yet happy. And what can I do to address this? And so they would count up the number of people, they would look at policies to improve, to decrease these deprivations by providing sufficiency to the people who lack it. And this is how the measure translates into policies, into programs, into policy designs, integrated policies, and so on. And this is what the composite measures may lack, because they couldn't know for sure that if they address these, that well-being will increase. So I said I would stop at 35 minutes to allow time for questions. It's just 1 minute to go. So the suggestion that I've had is that there is a space globally to think about well-being. There are many people acting at a very fast time. Within a year, we will have the well-being dashboard. There is not much of a vocalization of the possibility of using GNH index, and yet there are well-known and well-recognized challenges that people are struggling with the two major candidate measurement technologies of dashboards and composite indices in terms of equity, because they average up the very best off in the society with the poorest and just take the average, which hides inequality. They require more to always be better. And so if there is concern about perfectionism, the philosophy that you must impose goodness on people, then these measures will be resisted. And then there's also the question about their distance from policy, because there's not a direct monotonic line between an improvement in the indicator and at least the improvement in the composite measure. And if there is an improvement on the dashboard, because there's no weight and the dashboards are so big, it's not certain how much those will be profiled. So I've tried to suggest that Bhutan's GNH index could add value, whether it would be one element of a dashboard or whether it would be a signal indicator. This is just an idea, trying to draw on what has been learned from the poverty work. Your insights, your wisdom are very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Alkire. Okay, we have time for one or two quick questions or comments. If you have a question, if you have any comments, please raise your hand. Yes, we will give you, okay.
Thank you very much for a very inspiring and comprehensive presentation. I'm just wondering, this is very comprehensive presentation on quantitative approach on well-being. And I want to ask if you have any area or aspect of well-being which qualitative approach could contribute to bring us closer to more comprehensive understanding of well-being.
Thank you so much. Yes, you are correct. I focused on measurement because I was focusing on the demand for measurement this year in particular. However, there are many different angles of qualitative input. First of all, deep qualitative participatory work with communities is necessary to understand what their values are. What are the domains of well-being that they value? What are the lacks? Because as we know, well-being and ill-being are not polar opposites, but what needs to be incremented, just like investing in defense may not build peace. Second, there would be understandings of processes, even if there are an indicator like psychological well-being. What are the best ways to build that in? How do you build in empathy? How do you build in flourishing communities? That is not going to be read off the indicator. So moving from an outcome that people desire and they articulate to what are the best paths of advancing that requires the qualitative work. There's a lot of space also for how to intermediate between the policy and public sphere and the private sphere. So clearly there are certain aspects of well-being which cannot be created by policy, where the people themselves would need to go the last mile. And what is that division? How far can policy go in our day, where mental health now is an acceptable arena of activity, but others might not be that should be? And so where should that be? How could that move? And also how can people who have the causes and conditions of well-being, but are not well, what routes are open to them? Those are just a few. My department is very much mixed methods, but in this talk I've focused on the quantitative.
Okay, じゃあ next speaker, Dr. Dasho Karmawala, President of Center for Bhutan Studies in Thimphu. Today, he will give a lecture, Well-being in the History and Culture of Bhutan. Okay, Dasho, please.
I'm very grateful to the Institute of Future for Human Society and Kyoto University in general. It's been a wonderful 2 weeks already, and I've been able to work more than I could do in Bhutan, thanks primarily to the privilege of being reconnected to the Japanese food, reconnected to the wonderful Japanese toilets, and of course, the very creative environment of Kyoto University. The topic given to me is culture and history, but I think it's not possible at all for me to deal with the history with regard to this topic. That isn't there as any direct evidence, only you can infer from many, many other things. I would like to say that should we do some kind of investigation of the history of happiness of the ordinary people, aside from the people who meditate or who are elites, we will have to deal with certain criteria, and which would be the structure of community, which is changing now, but I think it was much stronger in the past. We will have to consider the issue of equality in the past. It's a fairly egalitarian society, but in terms of the status, especially related and shaped by Buddhism and Buddhist ideology, there were tremendous hierarchies. I think the resource level on a kind of simplistic level was quite a lot in the past because of the availability and access to forest land with very low density of population. And I think one factor we will have to also consider is the lack of market, which is very favorable to happiness. Once market enters into human relationship, things become quickly transactional. And so you are driven towards accounting of happiness with the availability of money rather than true relationships. So that wasn't there at all. It began much later from the 70s. And last thing is, I think in the past, the bureaucracy within absolute monarchy was very thin, actually. So the possibility of intervention and devising policies and laws that would profoundly affect private choices was very thin and small. But now monarchy has democratized, but bureaucracy has centralized. And I think this is probably true with all situations over the world. Bureaucracy actually shapes the whole environment of what you call attainment of happiness individually. So I'll stop about the history there and now go to culture, which I describe as contemporary. So as far as the data can tell a little bit about the culture of happiness and well-being. I first like to define GNH as attainment of the conditions of sufficiency or sufficiency constitution, which include both objective and subjective conditions. Now, I was there last year in Germany, and the more I go away from Bhutan, I'm able to do little more work. And I went a little bit into old Buddhist texts, which, because the modern text, contemporary text could not reply to me the distinction between condition and cause. And there I found with Dharmakirti, the great philosopher from India, a Buddhist philosopher, what is the distinction between cause and condition. So GNH deals with the specification of conditions, but conditions need to be present, but they become trigger or the immediate cause of happiness depending on circumstance, time. So they take effect as cause only at specific moments. But conditions rely on causes for their relevance and potentiality, and cause rely on conditions for their efficacy. This is what Dharmakirti wrote. Without conditions, no cause can become an effect or a result. Now, I thought that the sufficiency conditions and, described by Sabina a moment ago contains a little bit of justice built into it. And but I thought that I could characterize it as a parity rather than egalitarianism, because egalitarianism is fulfillment of something equally, whereas in GNH we are talking about attaining something, but with different inputs for different people at different points in their life. So, but the parity I'm talking about is also relative to the sufficiency threshold. So we need something, a condition to be sufficient, and amongst many sufficient conditions, something will be triggered as cause of happiness, but that will differ, as I said, place, time, age, demography, so on and so forth. Also, I want to distinguish the fact that this kind of maximization of sufficiency threshold is like maximizing the minimum rather than maximizing the maximum. This is very different, as you know. One leads to consequentialism and utilitarianism. The other leads to rather compassionate and just society. One odd thing you might notice is that in our calculation, those who exceed the sufficiency threshold has no priority in the variable. I mean, they just disappear, meaning the excess, in some sense, is not very useful in the accounting of GNH. But up to sufficiency threshold, which of course differs in terms of historical time, in terms of culture, guides human being towards balanced enrichment of many diverse things and fulfillment of diversity of enrichment. Now, the number of sufficiencies in the computation of GNH index includes this many variables. But I will discuss only 3 highlighted yellow part today. But when I listened to a presentation from Professor Seiji Kumagai, I wished that I had prepared PowerPoint on psychological well-being, community vitality, etc. It would have been little more pertinent. But I am sometimes, when I approach this sort of presentation, driven by a sense of security. I try to save it once online, I save it on my drive, and then I save it on my computer. And between these 3 things, I don't know which one is the prior one. So sometimes I replace the latest one with the prior one. So when I opened this morning, it happened, and I lost half the file, and I had to build. So that's why my coverage is very little today, only 3. And even in the 3.1, I lost yesterday's file, so I had to reveal it. So it's not an overview of anything. I just thought that I'll go into this mental exploratory analysis based on 11,000 household, which is nationally representative, district-wise representative, with respect to 3 questions: mental distress level as measured by general health questionnaire, measured on 3 scale. Self-rated health as measured by self-rated health questionnaire, of course, 5 scale. And subjective well-being, this is, I think, very much of interest to Professor Takahashi and others, measured on 0 to scale. But in the weight given to these 3, they are not outstanding. You can see that the last one, for example, mental health, this is psychological distress, carries only weight of 3/10 into 1/9. So it's a very tiny weight in the overall composite index of GNH. But nevertheless, I thought that you might find interesting in the contemporary Bhutanese situation how this slightly mental attributes show up in terms of prevalence. That's how many, what proportion, what percentage this sort of thing occur. But a little more exploratory today is what are the causes of these 3 phenomena, which requires then to go into a little bit of a regression exercise, quantitative exercise. So, so very straightforward presentation in that sense. I won't focus on the techniques, but dwell on the results. You can see the pattern of the prevalence rate across these categories of mental health, composed of answers to 12 questions. So not at all, no problem, no more than usual, much more than usual. Much more than usual and more than usual is often clubbed together, so we have only 3 scales. So you can see this is the psychologically distressed population, much more than usual or more than usual. So now this brings a picture of the change of this aspect of mental health across 17 years, how it is changing. By the way, the GHQ 12 item questionnaire, as you know, Goldbach since 1988 or so used it, and is quite a valid instrument to figure out very quickly psychiatric conditions of the people. So the severely distressed proportion often matches with the diagnostic depressed or severely distressed. So this is the reason why this quick method is used. So percentage of the population feeling certain mental morbidity, these are the morbidity symptoms, lost sleep, constantly under strain, overcome difficulties, been losing confidence, thinking as worthless person, etc., has decreased over the years. However, exceptions are the feeling of worthlessness as a person and feeling a sense of loss of control and feeling unable to overcome difficulties have increased slightly since 2015. And this, of course, merits further investigation along the excesses I already mentioned: too much bureaucratization, too many rules, sucking up power from the human agency towards institution, or could be all kind of causes. Then the person reporting more than usual in being able to concentrate, felt playing useful part, being able to face up to problems more than usual, etc., have declined. That means situation has improved over the years, over the last 17 years. But there is also places where overall psychologically severely distressed has increased. Now these are raw percentages of the sample. These are not population percentages, because to do that, it would be very cumbersome to show it in the PowerPoint. We will show within the confidence intervals. So these numbers will only fall within a range, but just for illustrative purpose, I show this. So in some places, there are things getting worse, and if Bhutanese government were very sensitive, this would be object for policy intervention. But we do not go at this detail level just now. So perhaps we do not know. We shall find out. Is it true that 15 minutes passed? Now, yeah, 15 minutes. My God. Okay, so severely distressed roast, maybe it is due to COVID. We shall see in the future from 2% to something like 4%, but the rate of increase was much more severe for women. And if you see this, it clearly shows the severely distressed proportion of female is much higher than male, and this is sustained since 2010. I won't go through this. Anyway, we thought that all of these phenomena across 12 items are not different. They are consistent, they are the same. But when we do exploration of factor analysis, we find out that they actually fall into two distinct groups. The implication for this is nothing, is that the positive mental health and negative mental health are distinct concepts. That's all the policy implication of this analysis. So remedying them have to be dealt separately. Reducing the negative ones do not mean the positive will increase or vice versa. I think this is the direction the analysis is indicating. Of course, this is just a simple correlation exercise to check what is related to what. And it is a preparation for the next level of analysis, which is regression. Because if two things are highly correlated, then that is multicollinearity, and that kind of introduces a lot of error terms. So for the regression on this, now I dealt with the prevalence part, and all I am trying to do is what would explain, what are the causes of distress, severe psychological distress, and this is the way data has been prepared. Because there is no time, I'm going to rush through. So this is the result really, and all we are trying to do in this kind of regression, of course this is OLS because the dependent variable, this is severely distressed is continuous variable from 1 to 36. 1 to 36. Higher the number, the worse the situation. Severely distressed. Something above 21 is severely distressed. Something above 15 is normal. So you can see that from here, all we are trying to do is the change in the distress level brought about by a unit change in the causal variable or the factors that cause it. And the numbers there, the coefficient that tells us something about the rate of change, the higher the number, the more important it is. And according to our analysis, suicidal thought, not committing suicide, but suicidal thought, disability, being unemployed, and being victimized means somebody creating fear in you or injuring you in some sense, ability of social support, being female, etc., are very important explanations for increased in the social distress. As these things go up, social distress also go up. The psychological distress go up. So the others are negatively related one. So next one, I think, of course, having done this, all I would like to say is that this relationship between severe mental distress and these independent or causal variables are significant. They are not random. But overall, this kind of equation really fails to explain a great deal of the variation in the severely distressed outcome or variable, because this is very poor. The R square, etc., is very poor. So the investigation is exploratory in the sense that now this linear equation is not too suitable. That's all I would like to say. And so I would like to move perhaps to generalize Otis or nonlinear least squares regression. Now I'm going to the self-rated health. In 2015, when we asked people what are they suffering from, these are the answers we got. This is the ranking. It just gives it some sort of, this is not diagnostic result. This is a self-reported diagnosis of people's ill health. And so now self-rated health questionnaire is a very quick way of finding the morbidity level of the population. And it predicts the mortality in the next few years. That is the most important predictive power of this simple question. And the next is that if you do not have information about the regional or spatial variation of mortality and morbidity, this is another quick way of compensating for that. You can see now which region, which demographic group is suffering from both physical and mental health. Self-rated health, of course, always includes in people's response also their mental health. So, this question administered in other countries were mainly longitudinal studies. Ours is cross-sectional. Now, the results come out like this. The people who have very poor health is, of course, age-related. This is rather to be expected. But what you may not fully expect is the extent of the decline of ill health, or those who describe themselves as suffering from poor health, as income increases. And the income one in Bhutan is completely related to educational qualification, because the legislators who are educated always make themselves rewarded the best. I don't know about other countries. So, however, this kind of bivariate relationship, 2-by-2 relationship, also turned out to be quite misleading, because this correlation will be infected with other hidden influence. We cannot segregate from this kind of analysis. You can also see that the female self-rated health is clearly much lower than the male self-rated health. And although, again, we have not imposed confidence interval, so the ranking will not be strict. Ranking will overlap when we impose confidence interval, but from this raw mean, you can also see what a huge variation across the country. And that tells us there is some kind of inequity in health status, and we have to investigate further why it is so. In terms of correlation coefficient, you can see it's not very strong except age and qualification. So older the individual, less the qualification, and that is because education wave did not touch the old generation. So when they pass away, then this correlation will improve in a sense. But one interesting thing is we always suspected that distance to the health center from the patient's house will matter a lot. But it is turned out that this now doesn't make any difference whatsoever. So it may be that the quality of the health center is now the issue, not the distance whatsoever, nor the waiting time is an issue. In terms of disability, of course, which feed into self-rated health, you can see surprisingly climbing or the mobility is now affecting about 4-5% of the Bhutanese population. This is a very important one because Bhutanese houses are a 2-story or so, and it is accessed by a very steep ladder. You can't climb that. Your ability to socialize, move around, etc. is affected. So this is the descriptive statistics now to delve further into what can explain what is the cause of self-rated health, which incorporates not only physical but psychological and social effect on your self-perception of your health. So this is it now. This is the result. I will summarize. But anyway, overall, the power of the equation to explain the variance in the main variable we are interested in, the self-rated health, is quite poor once again. Again, this may not be suitable now. I am looking for another option because this one is also linear. This assumes proportional relationship between scale of the dependent variable and the scale of the independent variable proportion. But that may not be also true. So anyway, with this sort of simple thing also, it's not entirely, of course, useless. It is not entirely useless because individual coefficients are unbiased, though they may be inefficient. Inefficient means that it is within the confidence interval is not exactly fitting. So, but they are not random because at 1% level of significant they hold. They are not random. So now this is the overall result. Not very surprising. Number one, those aged 70 years or more have an odd ratio of 5 times really. The report they will the effect of age from a unit change in effect of change on the unit change in the scales of self-rated head goes up by 5.1 times if you're 70. So same with the female, and this we also saw in the cross tabulation. We also saw, but it is supported. Education we saw, but another one we built is the deprivation level, and that's also a very powerful factor in the prediction of poor self-rated health. Interesting thing is that wealth matters again. Household item. At each addition of household item increases the self-rated health level by 8.2%. But interesting thing is that marital status in terms of never married, divorced, separated, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. So lastly, a little bit on this one, I rushed through. subjective well-being. We can measure it in different way, but I chose to focus on the answer to the question, taking all things together, how happy are you, 0 to 10? So I call this subjective happiness as different from Cantil ladder or life satisfaction, which asks questions about taking your whole life into judgment. How do you think your life has gone by 0 to 10? So mine is not that, it's focused on the current situation, subjective happiness. So if you see this map again, as a simple one, cross tabulation between income decile and thing, it seems to show that there is a very gentle association between higher income and higher subjective happiness. But the overall lesson from all this thing given by Easterlin, who wrote again in 2020, the last thing he wrote I referred, is that this is cross-sectional. It will show this, that richer people are a little happier. But in a longitudinal study, over time, increase in income has no effect on subjective well-being. That is his repeated and sustained argument. And therefore, it is not important for you to focus on GDP increase as a whole. Rather, you focus on things that are immediately acting on subjective well-being, and that may be happiness, well-being, that may be solving unemployment issue, etc. So, or providing. But I think that my explanation for that is little more than that. I think that higher income has no effect eventually on your happiness, provided all the non-monetary factors disappear from your life. And they do. They do. All the non-monetary, non-economic things which we value in GNH directly. These are things which are to be surveys established and sustained without going through the market. And they will be trust, belonging, family relationship, nature, so on and so forth. And they have no big correlation with per capita income rise. Here, this is a correlationship. This is sort of a shape of the U-curve of Bhutan. We do not know what happened in our survey in 2020, but since then, it looks like it is consistent, and it has risen only marginally, this one. But whether it rises by a lot or less, overall weight on the GNH index is very small. So, I want to say that. Whereas in other work, such as subjective well-being literature, this is the primary and the only big driver in understanding well-being. So correlated to this will be your health, your family life, your work-life balance, etc. These four domains. So after preparing this data, again, to run it through ordered logistic regression, because the dependent variable has 10 scales, we can do that. This is the coefficient or the slope you find. The higher the number, this will act on the slope for the slope gradient to rise faster. So you can see from this point of view, health, income, little bit, education level, spirituality, but the biggest influence, as we have been claiming, is coming from those who value family as important source of happiness. So the odds of an individual being happier goes up by 1.8, nearly 2, as a multiplicand for every sort of, compared to those who do not say this. So this is, and these two factors, health and family, also has corroborative evidence. When we ask directly people what makes you happy, these two, income, 19% of the population say this is very important. And then very close to it, 16% or 15% say health, and then family, and then health are very important. So, but again, because this logistic regression also assumes proportionality between proportional relationship, is linear, then there may be also other problem such as other technical problems. We need to opt for some other equations. So I stop here. Overall, I would like to say that this journey we take in our life is rather like traveling in Shinkansen, the best travel mode in the world, if you have money, of course. And at the end of the journey, people always ask you, I hope your journey was memorable, happy, etc. So in some sense, this is a kind of asking you, hoping that the journey was memorable and happy and so on and so forth. But the passengers in this are passive. They cannot do much. They can rearrange their sitting in their seats, a little bit here and there, seat number A and number B or something like that, and they can take coffee over there. But this is like focusing on the subjective well-being as correlated with the 4 dimensions of it. The scope is limited. You cannot change the direction. You cannot change the speed. It is pre-programmed. The driver is in control. And therefore, reliance on that, I feel we cannot change anything in society. So you need to go a little beyond that, check at the direction of the train itself, check how it is destroying the landscape, check how you are detached from the nature as seen through the train's window, and so forth. That is not really going to deliver any holistic well-being, and therefore slightly intervention at the policy level is very important. And so the survey and the indicators should urge government to change. And if government doesn't change, then of course we have to change the driver itself, because the train is not changing. We are limited. With that, I'd like to thank you for this great opportunity.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dasho Karmara. We have time for 1 or 2 questions or comments. If you have any questions, comments, please raise your hand. Please feel free to raise your hand and have a question and comments. How about that? No questions? Any questions? Any comments? Everything fine?
Don't you have any question? I have many questions, so if you have more, Japanese people are very shy, but that's very precious opportunity, so please ask any questions. No? Okay, and that's sure. I have so many questions, but later I will ask you personally. And first question is, you compare this 3 GNH survey regarding the subjective well-being. So the 2015 and 2022, the rate is very similar, but 2015, it's a little bit left. That means I thought the people were more unhappy, no? There is
I think you might be referring to 2010 curve, which is a little bit odd. We don't know, that was the beginning of our big survey, so perhaps there was data error, perhaps the survey was not fully, the questionnaire were not fully explained to the people.
Ah, okay.
I have a little bit doubt on that.
Okay,
2010.
okay. 2010.
Yes.
Okay, okay. But in the case of
2010, below 5, the proportion of population is very high.
yeah.
Beyond 5, the population is much lower who claim to inhabit these higher scales of
Okay.
well-being. So
Okay, so that means it could be a little bit problematic about the data of 2010, but 2015 and 22, the same. Yeah. Okay, okay, I understand. And I have another question about regarding the unhealthy day, disease day. Yes, and I forgot, but eastern part, the people living in eastern part are more, they had more unhealthy day, right?
unhealthy days and self-rated health also low in general.
Yes, and what do you think the reasons?
I'm also more puzzled than usual on this because the distribution of the basic health unit is governed by a formula, 30 minutes walking distance from your house. So in that respect, the thing is not thinner over there, facilities are not thinner, but my suspicion is that the diagnostic service is probably much poorer in these places where the population is much higher, because the health service center is established according to this simple rule, 30 minutes walking distance. But the diagnostic facility is not proportionally increased in this health center. It's the same one, whether it is a thinly populated place or so. I suspect that is the case, and all the general hospitals are located more and more towards center and west. So that medical culture may be far less also. But it remains to be studied more, because this is, as you say, the pattern is too strong to be ignored. Pattern of unhealthy days is also higher, self-rated thing is also higher, and this percentage again do not do much, give us much clue, because percentage may be 6, 7, but the number of absolute people in the East is much higher. So 6% of 45,000, for example, as opposed to 6% of 10,000 in Bhutan. So so I think these are the reasons in my suspicion.
Yeah.
Suspicion.
Thank you very much. I'm very, I really appreciate your detailed data, and I really appreciate your quantitative research. And there is a data, that's true. And how to analyze. There are many challenges for the future, but anyway, there are, you already collected so many data, so, which are very, very profitable for the researchers, I think. And not on, so today I ask Dashora to talk about GNH from such a psychological or economics point of view. But at the same time, you are the great historian and a practitioner and the great artist. And the Professor Imaida said, Dasho is a genius and you are the treasure of the Kingdom Bhutan. I think like that. So thank you very much. But do you have any other questions and comments? Or during the getting it together, maybe you can directly ask him questions. And by the way, do you have any comments or additional explanation for Dasho's side? No? For Dasho's side, do you have any other comments from your side?
No, I think looking at your presentation, I thought that I did not perceive enough yesterday, but psychological well-being, a complete one would have been more relevant. Looking at your issue you are handling, what we know little bit from the psychological well-being one, where no questions, such questions are never asked anywhere. Things like on anger, fear, competition, jealousy, etc., not asked anywhere. So we do ask those because they are key to Buddhist culture, which analyze the world from these afflictions. So I can present some other day when opportunity arises. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dasho Karumura, and thank you very much, Professor Kumagai. Okay, thank you very much. Next, Professor Kumagai will deliver a concluding remarks of the symposium. Please, Professor Kumagai.
I almost offered some kind of concluding remarks to, especially to Dashora. And now we need to close this symposium. And I appreciate Professor Sabina Alkire, who worked with Dasho Karumura to create the GNH index and also the GNH policies. We really appreciate both your works. And both are very, very precious scholars, and it's very rare to hold a discussion time. So I set the discussion time after the symposium and getting together for 30 minutes. Professor Sabina Alkire must leave within 30 minutes to go to the airport. So if you have any question, please ask her within 30 minutes. Anyway, I really appreciate your kind of participation to the International Symposium on Well-being. And again, please applause to eminent scholars. Yes, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Kumagai. Thank you very much, Professor Alkire. Thank you very much, Dr. Dasho Karumura. Okay, now the time for 5. Officially, we have to close the International Symposium. Thank you for coming. ありがとうございました。